Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Listen, just before I get started, I want to thank Don, Ian here, and Phyllis, who isn't here, for spearheading this thing, because Lynn is absolutely right. Without that, this just wouldn't have happened. And one other thing I got to tell you, you got to read the book. Even I found something out that I didn't know. Paul Barnaby came to work for us. He was kind of a miserable uppy guy. And it took us 3 years to get him to become a listener. And I wondered why. I read the book. He came from Ontario.
Somebody had to help you.
Anyway, thanks, Lynn, for taking many of us old guys down memory lane. You know I didn't write that. It's hard to believe it was about 45 years ago that some of us in this room sat down together to talk about a sport federation, what a sport federation would do, and how we could fund amateur sport. One of the stories I shared with Lynn for the book was about the day I met Bill Clark for the first time. Many of you probably know Bill Clark best for his career with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He played offensive and defensive tackle for 14 years for the Green and White, 8 as the defensive captain. I met him when he worked for the provincial government and Department of Culture and Youth. Joe Kanuka introduced me to him. Our first meeting in the hallway of the old Saskatchewan Sport and Recreation Unlimited building. Any of you people that seen that building, it should have been called Limited, because there was no limit. I was president of Baseball Saskatchewan. Joe was with Football Saskatchewan. Bill was just leaving a meeting with Joe. Joe had just made a strong case to these government guys that if there was to be a sport federation, it should have no role in programming. Its only goal should be to raise funds so that individual sports could run their own operation. I remember Joe asking me, what do you think SAS Sport should do for you? Are they going to tell you what to do? I said, no way, funding is the only thing I want from them. I didn't really say that to the media, I said, no goddamn. Funding is all I want. Bill knew from his talks with officials of other provinces that lotteries were coming to Saskatchewan, whether the government wanted them or not. These papers are getting glued together. Too many speeches. He knew Premier Blakeney and some of his people weren't really happy about the idea of the government promoting gambling. It didn't take much for Bill to convince us that lotteries might be a good fundraiser for amateur sport. We had a little hard time convincing some of the other people in government, but a bunch of volunteers from the amateur sport community could run a lottery. They wanted a guarantee before they were willing to give us our first lottery license. I remember being in the Maritimes for a baseball federation meeting. Joe was on the phone with bank officials telling me they were faxing some papers up to sign. And this was in August of 1974, and I had just become president of SAS Sport. Well, what they wanted me to sign was a promissory note for $100,000. Yeah. We had no money. We put our signatures up. If we would have lost it, I don't know what I'd done. Bill Clark said to me, the government will help us out. I said, oh yeah, sure they will. Yeah. Then I got thinking, I'm down east, my wife and little boy are back home, and I'm in the hotel and I said to myself, what the hell? All I can lose is my wife and boy, because I had nothing else. Well, let me tell you, about a year later, I never did tell Laverne that I'd signed this note. And about a year later, I told her when everything was going great, you know, that's the time. And then she said, well, what did you put up for collateral? You know, our house is mortgaged. I said, you and our son. That cost me 1 month sleeping on the Chesterfield. Now, this is true. 45 years later, we got a book written, okay? So I get an advance copy, thanks to Lynn and Saskatoon, so I could read it, and I have read the whole book. And my wife is scanning through it, and guess what? She finds this paragraph in it. Guess where I'm at? On the Chesterfield. But the only difference is now, because I'm an old guy, it doesn't hurt as much. I think the rest is history. You have to read the book, seriously. I think you'll enjoy the book. I know Lynn says it's a pretty good read. It's not, it's a great read. And Lynn really has captured our history. I'll just end by saying that amateur sport has always been highly dependent on volunteers. We found that SAS Sport and volunteers continue to provide direction, excuse me, for how lottery funding, not just for amateur sport, but also for culture and recreation, will be used. We have a good thing going in Saskatchewan. We have much better opportunities as volunteers to play an active role in the direction sport goes in Saskatchewan and the type of programs that are funded in our communities that most other provinces don't have, and also almost the world doesn't have. And just talking about partisan politics, I want you to know this is what happened when we were getting the license, and I sat in the gallery. Believe me, I was there because I was going to write down names. Who wasn't voting for it. Just to show you, there was people in politics can come together. Ed Trachewski made the motion because the NDP were in power. Cy McDonald seconded it. And I think there was only about 2 people that voted against it. So really, sports even helps bring politics together. We have to share this story with the next generation of sports leaders and make sure they understand the role they need to play in keeping amateur sport strong well into the future. And in my opinion, nobody else can do it better than the volunteer, and that has been proven. I'm ending when I talked to Mr. Burnett there, Mr. Jim Burnett. He said, whatever you do, don't thank me and Paul Barnaby. So I won't. But I would like to thank all of the boards of SAS Sport and the sport governing bodies for helping us to volunteer to reach our goals. Thank you. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Cas. So I don't have to tell anyone in this room that sport builds healthy, active communities and enables individuals to gain life skills such as leadership, teamwork, and goal setting. It's not just about Olympic champions, Hockey Night in Canada, or pro football. One of the most important chapters in the book is a chapter tracing the history of some of the initiatives